Most men in their 40s and 50s have no idea they are already competing with someone they have never met. They assume that because she is still present, still texting, still agreeing to plans, everything between them is real. They file the confusion they feel, the low-level unease, the sense that something is slightly off but never enough to name, under overthinking. And so they stay, they invest, they give more. But what if I told you that a woman can be fully present in a relationship with you while simultaneously keeping a second man close enough to step toward the moment she needs to? And more importantly, what if the signs she is doing it have been in front of you all along? Today, that changes. I have spent years in research studying female relational psychology, attachment behavior, and the specific patterns that emerge, consciously and unconsciously, when someone is protecting themselves from full emotional commitment. And what I am going to show you today are 5 of the most consistent, most documented, and most consistently missed warning signs that the woman you are investing in is keeping a backup option on standby. This is not about paranoia. This is not about suspicion. This is about knowing the difference between a woman who is all in and a woman who is keeping one foot outside the door. Stay with me. Hello and welcome back. I have spent years in research at the intersection of female psychology, relational dynamics, and the behavioral science of attraction and commitment. On this channel, we deal in clarity, not comfort, not flattery, not the version of things you want to hear, the version that is actually true. And the truth I want to share with you today is one that directly affects men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s more than any other group. Because men at your stage of life are the most likely to interpret ambiguity as patience, and patience as virtue, when what is actually being required of you is awareness. If you are a man in your 50s who has been in a relationship that felt slightly unbalanced, where you were giving more, investing more, feeling slightly more uncertain than she seemed to be, this conversation may answer questions you have been afraid to ask. Let's begin. Before we get to the 5 signs, I need to give you the framework, because once you understand why people keep backup options, the signs become impossible to miss. Research on romantic relationships has identified a well-documented pattern in partnerships. The tendency for individuals who feel uncertain about their primary relationship to maintain what researchers call alternative partner monitoring, the habit of keeping awareness of alternative romantic options while remaining in a committed partnership. People with lower relationship commitment show measurably higher attention toward attractive alternatives. And here is something important to understand about this behavior before we go further. It is not primarily female. It is human. A landmark 2014 study by researchers Jason Dibble and Michelle Drouin, published in Computers and Human Behavior, surveyed 374 adults and formally defined the back burner, a person we are romantically or sexually interested in, are not currently involved with, but keep in contact with in the possibility of a future romantic or sexual connection. Their research and a subsequent 2015 study by the same team found that backburner relationships were extremely common across all genders. Both men and women maintain them. The specific numbers from the researchers' own published summary are instructive. Men reported an average of 5.4 platonic and 2.9 romantic or sexual backburners. Women reported 2.4 and 1.4 respectively. Both genders do this. Men do it more, and neither gender is immune. What matters for this conversation is not the gender statistics. What matters is this. A 2021 adult study by Dibble, Banas, and Drouin found that the number of backburner contacts a person maintains correlates negatively with their commitment to their primary partner, regardless of gender. More active orbit equals lower investment in you. And it is worth being precise about what maintaining these contacts means. Backburner communication involves active, deliberate contact, texting, social media interaction, keeping someone warm. These are conscious choices, even when the person rationalizes or minimizes the intent behind them. For both men and women, attachment research tells us this pattern is most common in two profiles: those with an anxious attachment style who fear abandonment and maintain alternatives as emotional insurance, and those with an avoidant attachment style who maintain alternatives to preserve independence and control. In both cases, the behavior is not necessarily malicious, but it is consistently corrosive to the partner on the receiving end of it. Here are the 5 signs, drawn from observational patterns in relationship research and clinical practice, that the woman you are investing in may be operating this way. Sign 1. The availability ceiling. This is the first sign, and it is the most subtle, which is precisely why men at your stage of life so consistently rationalize it away. She is available up to a point, and that point never moves. She will meet you on Tuesday, but Wednesday is always complicated. She will stay until 10, but she always has somewhere to be after that. She is warm, present, and engaged when she is with you. And then, at a very specific and remarkably consistent threshold, she exits. Plans with you are made close to the day. Weekends are sometimes open and sometimes mysteriously unavailable. And when you ask in advance, when you try to establish something that requires her to commit her future time to you, the answer is almost always some version of "let me check and get back to you." Here's what the research tells us about this pattern. Dr. John Gottman, professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Washington, spent decades studying what separates couples who stay deeply connected from those who drift apart. Through thousands of hours of observational research at what became known as the Love Lab, he identified bids for connection, the small, often quiet attempts people make to be noticed and acknowledged by the person they care about. His research tracked newlywed couples over 6 years and found that couples who remained together turned toward each other's bids 86% of the time, while those who eventually divorced turned toward those bids only 33% of the time. The availability ceiling is not a scheduling issue. It is a commitment signal. She is giving you exactly as much of her time as she can afford to give without closing the door on her other option. And the reason she cannot give more is not that her life is busy. It is that her options are still open. What it looks like in practice: she is responsive within the window. She is present when she is there. But the window itself never widens, no matter how long you have been together, no matter how well things seem to be going, because widening the window would mean committing more of herself to you. And that is exactly what she has not yet decided to do. Sign 2. The performance girlfriend. This is the sign men over 50 find most disorienting because it feels so much like the real thing. She does all the right things. She asks how your day was. She remembers details. She is warm with your friends. She says the right words at the right moments. She is, by every visible measure, a good partner. And yet, something underneath does not land. There is a quality to her affection that you cannot name but cannot quite stop noticing, like watching a performance that is technically perfect but somehow does not move you the way it should. What you are picking up on is real. Attachment research, particularly the foundational work of Mario Mikulinker and Dr. Philip Shaver, distinguished professor emeritus of psychology at the University of California, Davis, describes how individuals with avoidant attachment styles rely on what they term deactivating strategies, behaviors designed to keep the attachment system suppressed, including denial of attachment needs, avoidance of genuine intimacy and dependence, and the maintenance of emotional distance even within an apparently functioning relationship. In plain language, a person using deactivating strategies can produce the visible outputs of a committed relationship: the warmth, the responsiveness, the right words, while suppressing the deep emotional investment and vulnerability that genuine commitment requires. The performance girlfriend gives you the experience of being cared for without the reality of being chosen. And men, particularly men in their 50s who have learned, through years of experience, to trust what they feel rather than just what they see. Often sense this distinction without being able to articulate it. The tell. Affection that arrives on schedule but rarely feels spontaneous. Warmth consistent in delivery but thin in texture. And critically, a near-complete absence of genuine vulnerability. She does not share the things that could make her look weak. She does not reveal the fears or doubts or old wounds that would require you to hold her, because sharing those things would mean trusting you with something real, and she has not decided yet whether you are worth that. Sign 3. The orbit keeper. A woman who is keeping a backup option does not keep him in a drawer. She keeps him close, close enough to feel him, close enough for him to feel her. And the way she keeps him close is through active, deliberate contact, maintained at a low enough level to seem innocuous, but consistent enough to preserve the connection. This is the friend she mentions too often in casual conversation, the colleague whose texts she answers with a speed she does not apply to yours, the man whose name comes up in contexts where names do not need to come up, and who she consistently, gently, almost imperceptibly defends if you ever note the frequency of his appearance in her life. The research is clear on this point. Maintaining a back burner is not passive. It requires active digital contact, texting, social media interaction, the deliberate keeping warm of a connection. The 2021 adult study by Dibble, Benas, and Drouin confirmed that the number of backburner contacts a person maintains correlates negatively with their commitment to their primary partner. The more active the orbit, the lower the investment in the relationship with you. Again, both men and women do this. The question is not whether backburner behavior is a female-specific trait. It is not. The question is whether the specific woman in your life is showing this pattern. And if she is maintaining a consistent, warm connection with a specific man that does not diminish as your relationship deepens, that is not friendship. That is orbit management, and it tells you something specific and important about where her commitment actually sits. What it looks like in practice, she is not hiding him. She mentions him casually, even openly, because the way she has constructed the situation in her mind, there is nothing to hide. He is just a friend. The contact is just normal. But notice, that contact is consistent. It does not diminish as your relationship deepens. It maintains itself at exactly the level required to keep him available. Sign 4. The future deflection. This one is precise and clinical, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Ask a woman who is fully committed to you about the future, and she will engage with you. She will have opinions. She will have ideas. She will say we without being prompted. She may become excited or nervous, or both. But the future will feel like a space she is willing to enter with you. Ask a woman who is keeping a backup option about the future, and something different happens. Not a refusal, not a fight, just a gentle, consistent, practiced deflection. I don't like to plan too far ahead. Let's just enjoy where we are. Why do we need to label things? I'm just not ready for that conversation yet. Each of these phrases on its own can reflect perfectly healthy emotional caution, but as a pattern, as the consistent, repeated response every time forward movement is introduced, they represent something specific. They represent a person who is keeping her future available. Commitment research developed by Dr. Michael Johnson, Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Penn State University, distinguishes between personal commitment, genuinely wanting to continue a relationship, and constraint commitment, staying because leaving feels difficult or costly. His framework shows that partners with high personal commitment willingly discuss and plan for the future because doing so feels exciting rather than threatening. Partners whose primary reason for staying is constraint experience future-oriented conversations as threatening because they require a level of investment they have not emotionally made. A woman who loves you and is choosing you will talk about the future with you. She may be cautious. She may want to move slowly, but the future will not feel like a threat to her. It will feel like something to move toward. The deflection is always kind. It is always accompanied by warmth or physical affection that momentarily dissolves your concern. And it always works, until the next time you try. Sign 5. The calibrated jealousy test. This is the 5th sign, and it is the most psychologically sophisticated of the 5, which is why it is the one most men never identify at all. A woman who is keeping a backup option will, at strategic intervals, introduce a small, controlled dose of jealousy into the relationship. Not enough to start a fight, not enough to constitute a genuine threat, just enough to measure your response. She mentions how attentive a male colleague was at a work event. She notes, almost in passing, that someone asked for her number. She describes a compliment she received from a man in a way that is just slightly more detailed than the context requires. And then she watches, not overtly, but she watches. What she is measuring is your security, specifically whether the relationship holds stable ground under pressure, or whether, when pushed, you reveal the kind of anxious, reactive, or possessive behavior that tells her this relationship would be costly to leave and therefore costly to stay in. Attachment research is consistent on this pattern. McHugh-Lincer and Shaver's work identifies that individuals high in attachment, anxiety engage in hyperactivating strategies, behaviors designed to probe and test whether a partner is truly available and secure, while those high in avoidance maintain emotional distance and resist full investment. Both patterns can produce versions of this test, each for different underlying reasons. The anxious person tests to see if you will chase. The avoidant person tests to see if you will demand. The test is not cruelty, it is data collection. She is trying to understand whether the ground beneath you is solid enough to be worth choosing over her alternative. What it looks like in practice. The mention is casual. The timing is not. It arrives when things between you have been warm and close, when she has received more of your investment than usual and feels the pull toward commitment most acutely. The test is her way of managing that pull without having to resolve it. I want to pause here, because I know what some of you are feeling right now. You are mentally running through your relationship, and some of these signs are landing. And alongside that recognition, there is something else, a familiar mix of frustration and self-doubt that asks, is this my fault? Did I do something that put her here? I want to say this directly. This was never your fault. Nobody teaches men how to read these patterns. You were never given this vocabulary. You were told to be patient, to be consistent, to give her time. And all of that advice, however well-intentioned, left you without the one thing that actually matters, the ability to see clearly what is in front of you. Today, that changes. Here's what the research consistently shows about how to respond when you recognize these signs. The first and most important thing is to stop escalating your investment. The instinct of most men when they sense distance in a relationship is to give more attention, more effort, more patience. Research by biological anthropologist Dr. Helen Fisher at Rutgers University on what she terms frustration attraction, the documented tendency for romantic feelings to intensify under conditions of uncertainty and barriers, confirms that this instinct is neurologically real. Uncertainty activates the brain's dopamine-driven reward system in ways that can mimic and amplify romantic passion. But escalating investment in response to these signs does not close the commitment gap. It widens it. When you pursue harder, you demonstrate that your attention is available regardless of her reciprocity. And a woman keeping a backup option reads that as permission to continue doing exactly what she is doing. The second thing is to create clarity, not confrontation, not an accusation, not a speech, a clear, grounded, honest articulation of where you stand and what you need. This is not a threat. It is a gift because it gives her the information she needs to make a real decision. Research on relationship commitment consistently shows that what closes a backup option is not romantic pressure or emotional intensity. It is the clear communication that a genuine choice is being required. The third thing is to trust what you feel. Men at your stage of life, men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, have a particularly reliable set of internal instruments. You have been through enough to know, at a felt level, when something is not right. When the ground is not solid, when the warmth is real, but the commitment is not. That instinct is not insecurity, it is experience. Trust it. How many times in your past have you felt the low-level unease described in these 5 signs and talked yourself out of it? How many relationships did you invest years of patience and care into, waiting for a commitment that never fully arrived? Because nobody gave you the language to name what was actually happening. Let that settle. Not with regret, with awakening. Because from this point forward, you see it differently. You know what the availability ceiling looks like. You know what the performance girlfriend feels like. You know what the orbit keeper is doing and why. You know the future deflection for what it is. And you know that when the calibrated jealousy test arrives, it is not evidence that she values you. It is evidence that she has not yet decided whether to. That awareness is not a weapon. It is a compass. Use it to stop investing in women who are investing in their options. Use it to recognize with the clarity that comes from real knowledge the difference between a woman who is cautious and a woman who has already decided you are not quite enough to give up everything else for. You deserve a woman who has made her decision, fully, without a backup, without an orbit, without a ceiling on her availability. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not their best available option while they wait to see if something better arrives. And from this point forward, you will know the difference. I'll see you in the next one.